The room was already electric before a single word was spoken. Cameras hummed, red lights flashing like sirens, capturing every twitch, every glance, every breath. A studio audience packed shoulder to shoulder leaned forward in anticipation, waiting for the kind of clash that would be replayed across phones and television screens for days. You could feel the tension. This wasn't just another debate night. This was a collision of worlds. Karoline Leavitt sat poised, a practiced smirk tugging at the corner of her mouth. She was ready for a moment. The kind of viral headline she craved, the kind that would fuel her brand. Across from her, Kash Patel adjusted his microphone with quiet precision. No theatrics, no wasted motion. His calmness was disarming, as if he knew storms could rage around him and he would remain unshaken. The moderator asked a question about immigration, about belonging, about who gets to call America home. The words barely finished echoing when Leavitt leaned forward, eyes flashing, voice sharp and deliberate. And then it came, a line so cutting, so brazen, the oxygen seemed to vanish from the room. "Why don't you just go back to India?" The insult hung in the air like smoke, acrid and choking. For a moment, time itself seemed to freeze. You could see heads turn in the audience, mouths open in disbelief, eyes darting between Patel and the moderator as if to confirm that, yes, she had really said it. The cameras caught everything, the smirk hardening on Leavitt's face, flicker of recognition in Patel's eyes, the wave of murmurs rippling through the crowd. It wasn't just words. It was a slap at identity, an attack on belonging, a challenge to the very idea of who gets to be American. In those seconds, silence was louder than any shouting match. Gasps broke the stillness. Someone in the audience whispered, "Did she? Really?" Others shook their heads, stunned that in the year 2025, this was the language chosen on a national stage. And yet amid the shock, Patel didn't flinch. His expression held steady, unreadable, almost serene. The room braced for him to fire back in anger, for a shouting match to erupt, for chaos to spill out. But what came next wasn't silence. It was a response that shook the nation. The insult wasn't just a stray comment. It landed at a time when America was already fractured, already raw from endless arguments over who gets to claim the nation's story. Immigration had become a lightning rod, cable news panels sparring nightly, state houses passing laws that pitted neighbor against neighbor, and presidential candidates stoking fears that newcomers were somehow intruders in their own land. To some, immigrants symbolized opportunity and the renewal of America's promise. To others, they had become a convenient scapegoat for every grievance, every economic anxiety, every cultural shift. So when Karoline Leavitt spat out those words, it wasn't just an insult to Kash Patel. It was a proxy war, the culture clash. Distilled into a single sentence, millions watching at home knew it immediately. Social media feeds lit up with outrage and applause, dividing neatly along ideological lines. One camp cheered, saying finally someone was telling it like it is. The other recoiled, recognizing the phrase for what it was, the ugliest kind of exclusion, a denial of belonging to someone who had given his career to public service. In that moment, Patel wasn't just Kash Patel, the former government official, the son of immigrants. He became a stand-in for millions, for every kid whose parents spoke another language at home, for every soldier who wore the uniform but still got asked where they were really from, for every family that carved out a life in a country that promised opportunity but too often delivered suspicion. His silence in those seconds after the insult became a canvas onto which America projected its hopes and fears. Would he lash out in anger, confirming stereotypes of volatility? Would he shrink away, confirming the cruel notion that he didn't belong? Half the country leaned forward, almost daring him to break. The other half prayed he wouldn't. The cameras panned between them, Leavitt basking in the smug satisfaction of a viral zinger, Patel's face unreadable, the audience caught. In the storm, it was more than political theater, it was identity on trial. Every immigrant watching knew the stakes. Every American descended from immigrants, which is to say, nearly all felt the echoes of their own family stories rumbling beneath the surface, because the question was never really about Patel, it was about America itself. Who gets to define it? Is belonging measured in bloodlines, in skin color, in accents? Or is it measured in service, sacrifice, in a belief in the ideals etched into the founding documents? The weight of history seemed to press down on the stage. This wasn't just a moment to be replayed on Twitter. This was a test, one that could either expose the fragility of America's promise or reaffirm its strength. And so the silence stretched. The audience holding its breath, the nation itself waiting to see what Patel would do. The easy path was fury. The easy path was retreat. But the right path, the one that could shift the entire debate, that could transform an insult into an indictment of arrogance required something far more powerful, and yet the story had only just begun. Karoline Leavitt didn't stumble into that moment by accident. She had built her entire persona on provocation, on being the one who said the thing others only dared whisper. In an era where outrage was currency, she was determined to be rich. Every appearance, every soundbite, every tweet was crafted to stir anger, to dominate headlines for a few news cycles. She thrived not on persuasion, but on spectacle. She had started her political career as a brash newcomer, quickly aligning herself with the most combative voices in her party. Colleagues who might have preferred quiet strategy meetings soon realized Leavitt wasn't interested in nuance. She was interested in the cameras. She was interested in the clip that would trend. "Why play chess?" she once told a reporter with a laugh, "when you can flip the board over and make everyone watch?" To her, politics wasn't about policy. It was theater, and she intended to be center stage. Her history was dotted with controversies that should have humbled her, but instead became badges of honor. She dismissed critics as snowflakes when called out for mocking women in politics. She doubled down when accused of race baiting, claiming she was the victim of political correctness. Each scandal was alchemy for her brand, spinning outrage into recognition and recognition into power. The more people gasped, the more she smiled. On talk shows, she leaned into arrogance with an almost gleeful precision. "I don't apologize," she declared once, crossing her arms and smirking into the camera. "If people are offended, that's their problem. This is America." Audience clapped nervously, unsure whether to admire her brazenness or recoil at her contempt. But for Leavitt, discomfort was the goal. If people were unsettled, they were paying attention. That instinct carried her into bigger arenas. Debate. Stages became her playgrounds. She interrupted, insulted, and sneered. Not to win arguments, but to win moments. She treated politics like a contact sport, convinced that dominance was achieved not through reason, but through humiliation. When opponents spoke, she rolled her eyes dramatically, her body language telegraphing disdain. When asked tough questions, she deflected with taunts. "Is that all you've got?" she quipped once, dismissing a fact-checker who had caught her in a blatant lie. The audience booed, but she wore it like armor. Critics warned that her style wasn't strength, it was recklessness. But Leavitt brushed it off. In her world, cruelty was power. Arrogance was confidence. The more she offended, the more she convinced herself she was untouchable. And yet, beneath the swagger, there were cracks. For all her bravado, she often betrayed insecurity when challenged by those who remained calm in the face of her chaos. She thrived on rattling opponents, but when her jabs failed to provoke, frustration flickered in her eyes. She needed the reaction. Without it, her power deflated. That was why she leaned so hard into identity attacks. They were the nuclear option, the guaranteed button to push. If she could frame someone as an outsider, if she could plant even a seed of doubt about their belonging, she believed she had one. It wasn't about policy, it wasn't about truth, it was about drawing lines of exclusion and daring her opponent to cross them, which is why on that stage with Kash Patel, she reached for her sharpest weapon. She didn't care about the facts of his service, the reality of his record, or the history of his contributions. All she saw was a chance to reduce him to his heritage, to cast him as other. To her, it was the perfect dagger. To the rest of America, it was something far more sinister, a mask slipping, revealing the ugliness beneath the performance. For years, she had mistaken cruelty for strength. She believed arrogance was armor, that mockery was a strategy, that exclusion was leadership. She had crafted herself into a lightning rod, proud to be hated, convinced that controversy equaled influence. But history has a way of humbling those who confuse spectacle with substance, because arrogance always meets its reckoning, and hers came fast. Kash Patel's story doesn't begin under the bright lights of a television studio. It begins in a modest home with immigrant parents who worked long hours and kept even longer dreams alive. They came to America with little more than determination, carrying the belief that this country could be both refuge and proving ground. They taught their son that dignity was not optional, that integrity was not negotiable, and that service was the highest calling a person could answer. Growing up, Patel knew what it meant to be underestimated. He was the kid asked where he was, really from the teenager who endured sideways glances when his family spoke their language in public, the young man told that people like him didn't belong in the upper reaches of law or politics. The path wasn't paved for him, was carved by his own persistence. Teachers sometimes overlooked him, classmates occasionally mocked him, but none of it slowed him down. If anything, it hardened his resolve. Education became his weapon of choice. Patel pursued the law with ferocity, determined to master the very system that so often told people like him to step aside. He studied late into the night, driven by a quiet conviction. If the rules were written to exclude, then he would learn them better than anyone else, and use them to fight for inclusion. Law school was not easy, and doors did not swing open automatically, but when doors didn't open, Patel pushed them. When they locked, he found another way in. That persistence carried him into public service. Patel took on roles that demanded both intellect and grit, working as a federal prosecutor, then as a national security official. These were not glamorous jobs, and few outside Washington knew his name at the time. But behind the scenes, he was making choices that mattered, investigating terrorism, handling intelligence, serving the very nation that some would later claim he didn't belong to. Each file, each briefing, each long night in government service was a quiet rebuttal to anyone who questioned his Americanness. He wasn't just in the room, belonged in the room. But even as he rose through the ranks, the struggle never vanished. Entirely in high-pressure environments, he was still underestimated, still sometimes dismissed. Colleagues mistook his calmness for passivity. Opponents mistook his measured tone for weakness. They didn't realize that composure was his greatest strength. Where others flailed, he stayed centered. Where others raised their voices, he chose his words carefully. He learned that power wasn't always in shouting. Sometimes it was in silence, in waiting for the exact moment when the truth would land hardest. His journey was a story of barriers, but also of breakthroughs. He shattered ceilings quietly, not with fanfare but with consistency. He proved that service mattered more than ancestry, that contributions outweighed prejudice. For Patel, being American wasn't about fitting someone else's mold. It was about embodying the principles that defined the nation at its best: courage, sacrifice, and unyielding belief in justice. This was why, when he sat across from Karoline Leavitt, he didn't look rattled. He had been here before, not in front of cameras, perhaps, but in spirit. Every slight he'd endured, every time he had been told he wasn't enough, every doubt cast his way had been training for this moment. He wasn't just defending himself. He was carrying the weight of every immigrant story. Every outsider who had been told to go back. Every dreamer who dared to believe in the promise of America, despite being told otherwise. And unlike Leavitt, Patel didn't need to posture. He didn't need arrogance to appear strong. His strength was woven into the fabric of his life. The calmness that unsettled his opponents came from years of practice, from learning that loudest voice isn't always the truest one. He had been underestimated for so long that it no longer stung. It motivated him. What his detractors mistook for passivity was preparation. Behind his quiet demeanor was a mind cataloging facts, remembering history, assembling truths like arrows in a quiver. He didn't explode with rage because he didn't need to. He knew that dignity could wound deeper than insult, that truth could demolish arrogance more completely than any personal attack. So as the cameras rolled and the insult hung in the air, Patel's composure wasn't an accident. It was the product of everything that came before his family's sacrifices. His own persistence, his years of service to a country that sometimes doubted him but never broke him. The insult may have shocked the audience, but for Patel it was just another test. He was ready. Because the truth is this: he wasn't just ready to answer Leavitt, he was born for this moment. The air was still charged from the insult, but Karoline Leavitt wasn't finished. She leaned into the microphone with a practiced smirk, convinced she had found her opening. "See, this is the problem," she pressed on, her tone rising with self-assuredness. "People come here, take advantage of our system, and then try to lecture Americans about what this country stands for. If you don't like it, maybe you really should go back." Gasps rippled through the studio once more. A few scattered claps broke out, not from the majority, but from the loyal few who mistook cruelty for courage. Leavitt latched onto the noise, mistaking it for validation. Her eyes scanned the room, hungry for affirmation, as if daring anyone to challenge her. The moderator attempted to intervene, his voice shaky with the impossible task of restoring decorum. "Let's allow Mr. Patel to respond," he began. But Leavitt cut him off, her words spilling faster now, her confidence inflating. "You know what's funny?" she jabbed, her smile growing sharper. "Every time people like him get called out, they play the victim card. They cry about being targeted when the truth is, they just don't believe in America the way we do." The phrase "people like him" hung in the air, heavier than before. The audience shifted uneasily. Some shook their heads, others whispered, angrily appalled by the doubling down. But Leavitt's confidence only swelled in the tension. She thought she had Patel cornered, forced into silence, pressured into defending his very existence. And yet Patel remained still. His eyes didn't narrow, his voice didn't rise. He simply waited, letting her words echo and burn themselves out. The silence was unnerving, a void where his anger should have been, a calmness that unsettled her rhythm. Leavitt faltered for half a breath, sensing the imbalance. She pushed harder, her barbs more desperate now. "You don't even sound like us," she sneered, grasping for a laugh line. "You don't understand real Americans. You're just a bureaucrat who thinks wearing a suit makes you one of us." But the laugh never came. Instead, there was a heavy pause, a collective unease. the realization that the line had crossed from harsh rhetoric into naked cruelty. The cameras caught it all, the faint discomfort in the moderator's face, the audience members leaning back in disbelief, the subtle shake of someone's head in the front row. Patel's silence became louder than her insults. He leaned back, slightly, his posture unshaken, his composure radiating patience. He wasn't rattled. He wasn't scrambling. He was watching her unravel in real time, and the audience could feel it too. Each insult she hurled began to sound less like strength and more like desperation. The tension in the room shifted. What had begun as her moment now teetered on the edge of collapse. She had overplayed her hand, blinded by arrogance, unaware that the very silence she mocked was turning against her. Viewers at home felt it too, that subtle change in gravity, the sense that the balance of power was about to flip, and Patel knew it. His stillness wasn't weakness. It was preparation. It was the calm before the storm, the steadying of breath. Before releasing words that would land with the weight of history behind them, he didn't need to match her volume. He needed only one sentence, one truth, delivered with precision. The room leaned forward, the camera zoomed tighter, the silence deepened. Leavitt smiled wider, mistaking quiet for surrender, but she was wrong. And then with a single sentence, the tide began to turn. Kash Patel leaned forward slightly, his hands folded calmly on the table, his eyes steady, unblinking. The studio felt like it was holding its breath with him. The red camera lights glared, hungry for his response, but he didn't rush. In a deep breath, exhaled slowly and let the silence stretch. For Leavitt, that pause was unbearable. Her smirk twitched at the corners, her fingers tapping nervously on the desk. She had expected fireworks, a shouting match she could dominate. Instead, she got patience. The kind of patience that made her bluster look small, and then, measured, Patel began. My parents came to this country with nothing but hope. They worked jobs most people wouldn't take, because they believed in the American dream. And because of them, I've been able to serve this nation at the highest levels of government as a federal prosecutor, a counterterrorism official, and a national security advisor. The room stirred. Murmurs broke out. Viewers could feel the ground shifting. Patel wasn't defending himself. He was redefining the terms of the debate. He let the words hang, then tilted his head slightly, his tone sharpening with controlled irony. So when you say go back to India, what you're really saying is, go back to being the son of a grocery store worker. Go back to studying late nights in law school. Go back to prosecuting terrorists who threaten this country. Go back to protecting the very freedoms that let you sit here and insult me. Gasps. Audible gasps. The crowd erupted in murmurs, some clapping instinctively, others shaking their heads in stunned admiration. Even the moderator froze for a beat, clearly aware he had just witnessed a line that would play on every news cycle, every social feed, every highlight reel. Leavitt shifted in her chair, her practiced confidence cracking. The smirk faltered. Her eyes darted briefly to the audience, searching for approval, but finding none. Her jaw tightened as Patel continued, his words flowing not with rage, but with the quiet force of truth. You see, Ms. Leavitt, America isn't about bloodlines. It's not about the color of your skin, or the accent your parents had, or whether your last name sounds familiar to you. America is about contribution. It's about what you give, not what you take. And I have given my life's work to this country. I didn't just talk about loving America. I served it. The audience broke into applause this time, loud and sustained, drowning out any attempt at interruption. Patel didn't flinch. He waited for the clapping to settle, then leaned forward again, his voice firmer. While you were chasing headlines, I was chasing terrorists. We were posting insults for clicks. I was briefing military commanders on threats to our homeland. While you were dividing Americans against one another, I was standing shoulder to shoulder with people of every background, every faith, every race, united in defending this nation. So if you think telling me to go back will shame me, let me correct you. It only proves how little you understand what being American truly means. The crowd roared, this time with cheers and whistles. The energy shifted completely. What had started as Leavitt's show now belonged entirely to Patel. He didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need insults. His calmness was the blade. His truth, the strike. Leavitt tried to interject, forcing a laugh, waving her hand dismissively. Oh, here we go with the sob story, she sneered, but her voice quivered just enough to betray her. The cameras caught everything, the dart of her eyes, the strain in her forced smile, the tightening of her shoulders. The audience wasn't buying it. For the first time all evening, she looked small, defensive, diminished. Patel didn't even acknowledge her interruption. He pressed on, his cadence deliberate, almost surgical. My story isn't unique. Millions of families like mine have come here, worked hard, served in our military, built businesses, raised children who contribute to this country. They didn't go back when it was hard. They stood up, because that's what America asks of us. And tonight, I stand here for them. The studio erupted again, not polite applause, but a wave of cheers, people on their feet, clapping, whistling. Even those who disagreed with his politics couldn't deny the moral clarity of the moment. He had turned the insult into a banner. Raised high for every immigrant family watching at home, Leavitt's composure crumbled further. She forced another smirk, but her eyes betrayed panic. The camera zoomed in, her jaw clenched, her hand fidgeting with her notes. Her gaze darting toward the moderator as if pleading for rescue. She had thought the insult would silence him, but it had unleashed something far greater than she had imagined. Patel paused again, letting the noise swell and then fade. When he spoke next, his voice softened, almost reflective. You can tell someone to go back, but the truth is, we never left. We are America. We are its workers, its thinkers, its defenders, its dreamers. This country isn't diminished by our presence. It's strengthened by it. A hush fell, heavy and reverent, before another eruption of applause. Viewers at home tweeted furiously, clips already bouncing across. Timelines hashtags were forming in real time. It was no longer just a debate. It was a national moment. Patel leaned back, hands folded again, his face composed, as if he hadn't just dismantled an insult and rebuilt it into an anthem. His breathing remained calm, his expression steady. He looked not like a man under attack, but like a man at peace, certain in his truth. Leavitt sat rigid, her earlier swagger dissolved. She glanced around, blinking quickly, her body language betraying discomfort. The villain had struck, but the hero had landed the knockout. The debate was still happening on stage, but in the digital world it was already over. Within minutes of Patel's mic drop counterattack, the clip flooded social media. Twitter timelines lit up like fireworks. Instagram Reels looped the line about "we never left," and TikTok edits set his words to triumphant music. Hashtag sprouted instantly. Hashtag we are America. Hashtag Patel moment. Hashtag go back no more. For every sneer Leavitt had tossed, there was now a meme mocking her reaction, her smirk dissolving into panic, her eyes darting as the applause drowned her out. Someone freeze-framed the exact second her face fell and captioned it, "When arrogance meets reality." Another stitched Patel's line with images of immigrants in military uniforms, in classrooms, in hospitals, a visual chorus underscoring his truth. The numbers surged. Millions of views within hours, trending across platforms by morning. For once, America's fragmented feeds seemed united by the sheer drama of the takedown. On Twitter, progressive commentators hailed it as the moment of the year. On YouTube, reaction channels uploaded breakdowns, pausing on Patel's steady breathing, his pauses, his composure. Even late-night comedians picked it up, joking that Patel had delivered the calmest thunderclap in debate history. News outlets seized on it too. Cable networks replayed the exchange on a loop, each host framing it through their lens. Progressive anchors called it a victory for dignity and a lesson in restraint. Conservative commentators, some squirming uncomfortably, tried to pivot, insisting Leavitt had been taken out of context, but the visual didn't lie. The crowd's reaction, her unraveling, his calm strength, it was undeniable. Soon celebrities joined in. Actors, musicians, athletes tweeted out Patel's line, "We never left. We are America." One basketball star shared it with the caption, "That's leadership." A best-selling novelist wrote, "This isn't just about politics. This is about the truth of who we are." The ripple effects grew wider. Teachers played the clip in classrooms. Parents showed it to their kids. Patel's words had leaped off the stage and into the culture at large. But the conversation went deeper than memes and sound bites. It sparked something raw, something essential. People began sharing their own stories in response. A nurse posted about being told to go back even after serving on the COVID front lines. A veteran wrote about being asked where he was really from, despite deploying twice overseas. Comment sections filled with voices saying, "This is my story too." Patel's moment had become more than personal vindication. It was collective validation. Leavitt, meanwhile, found herself drowning in backlash. Her defenders tried to reframe her insult as just a joke or tough politics, but the tide was too strong. Editorial boards condemned her remarks. Rival politicians distanced themselves. Hashtags mocking her arrogance trended alongside Patel's praise. She had set out to score a viral hit, but instead became the face of something uglier. A cautionary tale of what happens when cruelty masquerades as strength. And yet, the focus wasn't really on her anymore. The country was talking about Patel. About his poise, his dignity, his refusal to bow to insult. The clip wasn't celebrated because he humiliated her. It was celebrated because he transcended her. In an age of shouting matches and chaos, he had shown another path. One where composure crushed arrogance, where truth rang louder than hate. The ripple effects were impossible to ignore. Pollsters noted a spike in Patel's favorability among independents who had never heard his name before. Editorial writers framed it as a turning point in how America sees belonging. Even international media picked it up, framing Patel's line as proof that the fight for identity and inclusion in America was still alive, still burning. The night had delivered a moment that would live on far beyond the debate stage. And yet, as the country buzzed with memes, hashtags, and applause, Patel himself remained calm, almost untouched by the frenzy. For him, the victory wasn't in trending hashtags or viral clips. It was in the deeper truth the moment revealed, because for Patel, this wasn't just about winning a moment, it was about something far bigger. When the noise finally settled, Patel leaned into the microphone one last time. It's not with the sharp edge of a rebuttal, but with the weight of reflection. His voice softened, carrying not just to the audience in the studio, but to the millions who would watch in living rooms, classrooms, and on phones across the country. Here's the truth, he said, pausing to let the silence hold. America is not defined by who you push out. It's defined by who steps up. It's not about telling people to go back. It's about asking all of us to go forward together. The words landed like an anchor in the storm. Viewers who had been rattled by the ugliness of the insult now felt steadied by the clarity of his message. Patel wasn't simply defending himself anymore. He was speaking for a nation wrestling with its own contradictions, a nation still trying to live up to its ideals, he continued, his cadence deliberate, his eyes fixed on the crowd. My family came here because they believed America was big enough to hold their dreams, and every day since, I've worked to give back, not because I was told I didn't belong, but because I always knew I did. That's what makes us American. Not where we come from, but what we contribute. Not the names we carry, but the service we give. The audience nodded, some with misty eyes, others clapping quietly as if to honor the gravity of the moment. This was more than politics. It was a reminder of the promise at the core of the American story, that anyone from anywhere could stake their claim to belonging by what they built, by what they sacrificed, by what they stood for. Patel's words swelled into something larger than himself. Dignity will always beat hate, he declared. Service will always beat arrogance. And the truth, no matter how many times people try to bury it, will always rise. Applause thundered again, not the raucous cheer of entertainment, but the deep, resonant kind of applause that comes from recognition, from knowing you've just heard something that will echo long after the lights go out. In that moment, Patel wasn't just a debater or a public servant, he'd become a vessel for values Americans longed to see in their leaders. Composure, principle, courage without cruelty. Leavitt sat silent, diminished by contrast. She had tried to reduce him, but he had expanded the conversation beyond her reach. The villain had chosen insult. The hero had chosen inspiration. And in the comparison, America saw the difference between arrogance that divides and dignity that unites. As the debate drew to a close, Patel offered his final words, steady and unflinching. This country is ours, all of ours. It's not because of what we look like, not because of where our parents were born, but because of what we're willing to give to one another. That's the America I believe in. That's the America worth fighting for. The crowd rose to its feet. Applause roared. And across the country, millions felt not just vindicated, but uplifted. They saw in Patel's calm defiance a reflection of their own stories, their own dignity, their own claim to belonging. He hadn't just answered an insult. He had turned it into a declaration, one that would outlast the moment, one that would live as a reminder of what America at its best could still be. Section 9. Outro and call to action, 300 words, tie back to the title. How Patel's response shocked. America. Deliver moral clarity. The insult failed. Dignity 1. Call to action. Encourage viewers to subscribe, share, and stand for values that unite, not divide. End with a cinematic final line. Because in the end, it's not where you come from, it's what you stand for.